One word from a lost child unlocked a soldier's hidden past. The evening shadows began to fall along the narrow country road, where every day, the distant footsteps of travelers continued to make their way back home. Henry, a soldier recently discharged, was returning to the land he had left almost 10 years ago. On his back was a worn-out backpack, and in his eyes, there was a distant look, as though he were searching for something lost. But what weighed most heavily on his heart was not the deteriorating house or the words he feared hearing. Today, he had returned for one single reason: his little daughter. And a promise unfulfilled. The day he left, his daughter was just an infant, her pure eyes unable to comprehend the pain of her father being away. But now, as he returned, she had grown, and he didn't know where to begin. "Dad, you're the one who saved my mom, right?" The innocent question from the child echoed like a knife to his heart. She looked at him with eyes full of doubt and curiosity. He didn't know how to answer. For over the years, he hadn't been able to keep the promise he made to her. Henry walked into the old house, where countless beautiful memories once lived. The house was now nothing but peeling paint and old wooden boards. The material things he might have lacked, but the love for his daughter, that he was sure remained intact. Yet, perhaps that love now only carried old wounds that could never heal. He sat at the old table, where his mother used to sit, waiting for him to come home. He wondered, would his mother understand the sacrifices he had made? Would his family understand that for a soldier, it wasn't wealth or material goods that mattered, but the promise to protect his family and homeland? Henry lowered his head, his hands rough from years of hardship. He had nothing left but memories. The battles he had fought, and wounds that couldn't heal. But the most painful thing of all was the lack of affection. The criticism from his loved ones, and the fear that he couldn't do anything for his daughter. The world around him seemed like a sad painting. But deep in his heart, there was still a faint spark of hope. How could he keep his promise to his daughter? To be the father she could be proud of? Henry quietly sat there, his calloused hands tightly gripping the backpack, as though it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the present. Faint memories of the battlefield flooded his mind, the coldness of the long nights, the tense hours on the front lines, and the overwhelming silence when he had to say goodbye to his comrades. Some of whom, perhaps, would never return, but perhaps the most haunting thing of all was the promise he made before leaving, the promise to return. To protect his daughter. But now, looking into his daughter's eyes, full of innocence and disappointment, he knew that promise had been torn apart by time. He couldn't do anything for her. Couldn't make up for those lost years. Do you remember me, Dad?" Henry gently asked, looking into the unfamiliar gaze of his daughter. Little Emma, she remained silent, simply looking at him with a wary, questioning look. Henry knew his daughter had grown, and in his absence, she had built her own world. A world with her mother and grandmother. But without the father, the soldier, she had heard about only in old stories. Emma slowly dragged a small chair over to him, carefully sitting down, her eyes still filled with curiosity. She spoke softly. "Mom says you went to fight in a war. Were you a hero, Daddy?" Her simple question felt like a deep cut to Henry's soul. He paused, unsure how to respond. What her mother had told her about a strong, brave father who protected everything around him wasn't entirely wrong. But it wasn't completely right either. He hadn't been able to protect his family as he thought he would. Hadn't been able to hold on to those precious moments with his wife and daughter. He looked into her innocent eyes and suddenly remembered a time long ago. Of his mother, the woman who had raised him during the years without his father. Who had instilled in him a deep belief in the importance of keeping promises. No matter what the cost. His mother always said, "A promise is the only thing a soldier can keep. Even if it costs everything. You'll be proud of me one day. Emma, you'll understand when you're older," Henry finally said, his voice thick with emotion. The words lingered in the quiet of the old house. A quiet promise to himself that no matter what, he wouldn't give up, though his military career was over. Though everything he fought for had faded. He still had one thing left to hold onto. His promise to his daughter. Henry tried to adjust to the ordinary pace of life again. He attempted to reconnect with the things he had missed during all the years he was away. The lush fields he once ran through as a child now felt strange and unfamiliar. The small roads around the village, where he had once raced his friends during his youth, were now silent, but every time he looked into his daughter's eyes, he saw a spark of hope ignite in his heart. Then one day, as he was cleaning up the old house, things that seemed insignificant at first began to reveal unexpected clues. Henry discovered a forgotten room, one that had been left untouched for years. Inside was an old wooden cabinet containing relics his father had left behind, a faded soldier's uniform, a journal with pages worn from time, and a blurry photo of a woman Henry couldn't place. The woman in the photo didn't just confuse him, she also made him feel like something was wrong. That photo brought back memories of the stories his mother used to tell about his father, the hero soldier, but one who carried painful secrets. In the journal, his father wrote about countless campaigns, comrades lost, and decisions made in moments that could never be forgotten. And there was one particular passage that made Henry stop and think. "My son, you will understand when you grow up. Everything I did was for you, for your future. A soldier cannot change the past. But I will protect you. I will keep my promise." It was then that Henry understood why his father had left the family, not because he didn't love them, but because of a mission he could never talk about. The secrets his father had kept hidden were perhaps why Henry couldn't find peace in his own life. But now, Henry realized that the most important thing in his life wasn't what he had lost, but the promise he still carried in his heart. Day by day, Henry continued to live in the old house, a place where every wall seemed to hold an untold story. During the early days back in his hometown, he had no intention of delving into his father's past. The fragments of memories he held were enough to let him live in peace, continue taking care of his daughter, and nurture hope for a quiet future. But then, everything started to change. One afternoon, as the sunlight waned and a sudden rainstorm hit, Henry decided to fix the porch of the house. As he worked, his mind drifted back to old memories. While moving a piece of old wood, he stumbled upon a faded map buried among the piles of discarded items. The strange lines and mysterious symbols on the map made Henry pause for a moment, feeling as if something was calling out to him. His heart raced, as if he had a strong premonition that this wasn't just a coincidence. Henry brought the map into the light. The markings weren't just geographic locations, but seemed to hold some kind of message that he couldn't quite understand. There was one particular spot marked on the map, along with his father's notes, where dreams for the future are protected. Those who do not understand will never see the true value. He set the map down, sighed, and began to think. Henry couldn't shake his curiosity about the strange symbols on the map. Perhaps his father had left him a trail, a clue to continue the journey his father had started. It seemed that, for all those years, his father had lived in a world full of secrets, leaving only a small portion for the people who remained. Henry decided that he would continue exploring. He didn't know what he would find, but his soldier's instincts told him this might be his only chance to uncover the truths about his father's past, things he had never understood. The following day, he began his journey, following the clues on the map. The path leading to the marked location wasn't an ordinary road. Henry had to pass through dense forests, climb rugged hills, and travel through areas that were not for the faint of heart. But for a soldier accustomed to the harshness of the battlefield, it wasn't a difficult task. Every step he took was filled with determination, even though he knew dangers awaited him ahead. Along the way, he encountered a few villagers. They looked at him with surprise, as though they couldn't believe the soldier from so many years ago was back. An elderly man, who had known his father, stopped by the road and gazed at Henry with a thoughtful expression. "You don't know, do you? But your father was someone special. He did things that no one could ever imagine," the old man said, shaking his head. "The thing is, not everyone can understand those secrets." The man's words caught Henry off guard. His father had kept secrets that even those who knew him best couldn't fully comprehend. This made Henry even more determined to uncover the truth. Though the man's words didn't provide any concrete details, it was a sign that what his father had done wasn't just about family. It likely had something to do with the community, and a greater mission that Henry hadn't yet realized. Henry's journey continued for several more days until he reached a dense forest. According to the map, there was a large red dot marking an area nearby. Under the thick canopy, he found a forsaken patch of land, a place that seemed untouched for many years. The surroundings felt eerie, as though a secret was waiting for him there. Stepping onto the land, Henry began to dig, hoping to uncover something significant. After a while, his shovel struck something hard. Henry's heart skipped a beat. He continued to dig, and soon the object was fully exposed. It was a metal box, rusted from the passage of time. He opened the box and found a collection of documents, maps, and notes from his father. These materials revealed that his father hadn't just been a soldier fighting for the country, but had been part of a secret organization, people who did work that few knew about. Work that wasn't acknowledged but held immense value. One particular document left Henry stunned. It was a copy of a letter his father had written. "You will understand when you read this. My son, the life of a soldier is not only about the battlefield. We protect things the world cannot see, values that people cannot understand. And if one day you don't see me again, remember that everything I did for you." These words Henry had never known, completely changed his perception of his father. The soldier he had thought was a stranger for so many years now seemed like a hero, not just in battle but also in the quiet sacrifices he had made. Sacrifices Henry had never known about. These clues didn't just leave Henry feeling overwhelmed, they also made him realize that his father had given up much more than he could ever imagine to protect things he could never explain. Each step of Henry's journey now felt like a path to fulfilling the promise he had made, not just to his daughter but to the memory of his father. As Henry stepped out of the land, his heart felt heavy. The metal box had opened a new chapter in his life, but it also raised a multitude of unanswered questions. The documents inside not only provided insights into his father's past, but also revealed a larger secret he couldn't fully comprehend. Once again, he turned his gaze to the words his father had written in the letter. "A soldier's life is not just about the battlefield. We protect things that the world cannot see, values that people cannot understand." Henry couldn't stop thinking about those words. What values had his father been protecting? How could a soldier have to hide the truth to such an extent? He looked through the maps and documents, trying to piece the clues together. But everything remained unclear. The symbols on the map, the passages in his father's journal, seemed like missing pieces, unable to form a complete picture. Determined to uncover the truth, Henry began to carefully analyze every piece of information. One map in particular caught his attention. It marked a location deep in the forest, not far from his village, with a red circle around it. The map also had a note that read, "Restricted area. If needed, seek out the woman who can help." Henry muttered the words to himself, feeling a strange sense of urgency. Something important awaited him there. But there was one question he couldn't shake. Who was this woman? Why had his father mentioned her in the documents? She seemed to know things that even Henry couldn't imagine. With renewed determination, Henry decided to follow the map's clues. He returned home, packed his belongings, and prepared for the next phase of his journey. He couldn't ignore the questions swirling in his mind. These secrets his father had kept for so long, now they were his to uncover. And it felt like he had no other choice but to continue the search. The next day, Henry set off along the path marked on the map. The road leading to the location wasn't easy. He had to pass through thick forests, climb steep hills, and navigate areas that felt more like challenges than a simple journey. This path wasn't meant for the faint-hearted, but for a soldier used to the roughness of battle. It was nothing more than a test of his perseverance. During his journey, he met a few villagers. They looked at him in disbelief, as if the soldier from years ago had returned from the past. An elderly man, who had once known his father, stopped and gazed at Henry with a deep, contemplative look. "You don't understand, do you?" the old man said. "Your father was special. He did things that no one could ever imagine." Henry was taken aback. His father had done things that not even those closest to him could understand. This revelation pushed Henry's resolve further. The man's words didn't offer any concrete answers, but they were enough to fuel Henry's determination. His father's actions weren't just for the family, they were connected to something far larger. A mission Henry hadn't yet fully grasped. Henry's journey stretched on, through dense forests and across rocky paths. Finally, he reached a clearing that matched the spot on the map. His heart raced as he noticed an abandoned area in the forest. Untouched by time, the eerie atmosphere hinted at a secret hidden there. Something significant that his father had left behind. Without hesitation, Henry began to dig. After a while, his shovel struck something solid. The suspense built up in him. And with renewed determination, he dug further. Soon, the object was uncovered. A rusted metal box. He opened it to find a collection of documents, maps, and notes, his father's legacy. Inside was proof that his father had not only been a soldier, but part of a secret group protecting things few could comprehend. The discovery left Henry breathless. His father wasn't just defending his country, he was safeguarding something far greater. A treasure, a truth that needed to remain hidden at all costs. These revelations were shocking, but they gave Henry the clarity he needed. It was now up to him to protect what his father had safeguarded. To continue the journey his father had started. The small house in the quiet forest seemed to contain all the secrets of the past. A past Henry had never imagined. As he stepped inside, the air grew thick with mystery. The old, antique furniture, the faded paintings on the walls, and the maps pinned up everywhere gave the place an eerie atmosphere. This was a room filled with history Henry had never known. Each detail in the house left him even more confused and curious about the connection between his father and the woman who lived here. The woman, who had led him into the room, turned and looked at Henry. Her face was unreadable, but there was a calm authority in her eyes. She closed the door, motioning for him to sit. Henry stayed standing for a moment, unsure of what to do, but knew he had no choice but to listen. "You want to know everything, don't you?" the woman said in a firm tone, her voice heavy with the weight of years of secrets. "Everything your father did, everything he kept hidden. But before I tell you, you must understand that the truth I'm about to share will change everything you know about your family." Henry sat down, his heart pounding in his chest. The air seemed to thicken around him, and for the first time, he felt like he was about to learn something that would shatter the world he knew. "Your father wasn't just a soldier," the woman continued, her voice steady. "He was part of a secret organization. A group created to protect things that the outside world could never understand. Their goal wasn't to win battles or fight wars, but to protect a truth, one that, if revealed, would change everything. The treasure your father protected isn't gold or silver. It's a truth about history and ancient technology, things that could change the world." Henry couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father had been a part of something much larger than he could have imagined. This was beyond anything he had ever known. The secrets his father kept, the life he led, all of it was part of a much greater mission. "But why?" Henry asked, his voice full of confusion and disbelief. "Why did my father have to keep all of this hidden? If it was so important, why didn't he share it with the family?" The woman's face softened, and she walked to a small table, pulling out a photograph. It was an old black and white picture of a man and a woman standing together, both looking serious, as if they were protecting something. Henry recognized his father in the photo, but the woman beside him was unfamiliar. "This is a picture of your father and a woman very important to him," she said, handing Henry the photo. She knew everything about the organization, everything about the mission, but she died in an accident years ago. After she passed away, everything started to change. Henry was stunned. His father had shared his secrets with this woman. But after her death, things had gone awry. The mission, the organization, everything his father had worked to protect seemed to be falling apart. "Your father promised to protect the treasure, and everything she left behind. But that promise led to the lies, to the secrets," the woman continued. "That's why he had to hide everything. Even from you." Henry's mind was spinning. The man he had admired, the soldier he thought was only a hero, had been keeping an enormous secret. And now, he was the one who had to carry on that mission. "The truth you're about to learn isn't just about your father," the woman said, her tone becoming serious. "There are people who want to destroy it all. And if they find out that you know, they will stop at nothing to take it from you." Henry felt the weight of those words. His father had spent his life protecting a secret. And now, it was Henry's turn to do the same. But the more he learned, the more he realized that the road ahead would be filled with danger. There were people who would do anything to take the treasure, to exploit the truth for their own gain. And Henry knew that he would have to fight to protect what his father had given his life to safeguard. The light of a new day shone through the small window. But inside this room, the truths that Henry had been seeking for so long were slowly being uncovered. Piece by piece, he sat still, his eyes fixed on the woman before him. She was no longer just a stranger in his life, now. She carried a significant role, holding the key to a past Henry had never known. "We need to leave now," the woman said, her voice urgent. "The enemy has started tracking us. And if we don't act quickly, everything will be buried forever." Henry stood up, his heart filled with unease and confusion. Everything he had just learned felt too fresh, too unbelievable. The truth about his father, what he had fought for, was unraveling before him. And yet it all seemed to lead to more questions. How could his father have kept such a massive secret? And why was there an enemy pursuing it? It felt like Henry had stepped into a dangerous game he had never prepared for. But there was no turning back now. One thing was clear: he couldn't let the truth be destroyed. Everything he had learned, everything his father had fought for, had to be protected. The woman led Henry through the forest, taking him to a place he had never been before. Though there was nothing particularly special about the place, Henry felt something odd, an unsettling feeling that the air was thick with tension. After walking for a while, they came to a large stone wall, which was carved with strange symbols. One of the symbols, Henry realized, was the same one he had seen on his father's map. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a clear sign that this place was connected to everything his father had worked to protect. "This is where the treasure is hidden," the woman said, her gaze intense as she looked at the wall. "We need to open this door. But only those from the organization can do so. And you, Henry, are the only one who can make it happen." "How can I open it?" Henry asked, his voice filled with doubt. "I'm not part of the organization. I'm just a soldier who's just come home." The woman didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the stone wall for a moment before turning to Henry, her eyes full of something deeper. "You don't remember, but your father taught you these symbols when you were a child. He prepared you for this. These aren't just codes or ciphers. They're part of your memory." Henry stared at the wall in disbelief. Had his father taught him these things? Why couldn't he remember? It felt as if a door in his memory had suddenly cracked open. But the details were too blurred to understand. Why would his father keep something so important hidden? "Try it," the woman said softly. "You'll know what to do." With a vague feeling of certainty, Henry placed his hand on a specific symbol on the wall, where he felt a faint vibration. In that moment, the stone wall began to shift, revealing a hidden doorway. Inside, there was a dimly lit room, filled with ancient bookshelves and maps. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, with metal boxes stacked on top and an old, dusty computer beside them. It looked like something out of a forgotten world, a place where time stood still. "This is where your father kept the most important things," the woman said as Henry stepped into the room. "The documents, maps, and ancient technologies that only the organization knew about. But there's more, something you haven't been told." Henry turned to look at her, his heart racing. "What is it?" The woman paused, as if considering how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with gravity. "Your father wasn't the only one protecting this treasure. He was betrayed, and there's someone inside the organization who's trying to seize everything. These documents may not just contain secrets about technology, but evidence of conspiracies and lies within the very organization your father worked for." The weight of her words hit Henry like a punch to the gut. The very organization his father had been loyal to, the people he trusted, had been the ones who betrayed him. Why would his father, a man of such integrity, have to protect something so dangerous? Everything seemed too large, too complicated to fully grasp. "Did my father sacrifice everything just to protect these documents?" Henry asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Yes," the woman nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. "But he didn't just protect these documents. He protected what was left of a world we don't fully understand. He did it all for one reason: to protect his children. To protect future generations from falling into the hands of those who would use this power to control the world. Henry's hands shook as he held the documents, the truth of his father's mission becoming clearer. This wasn't just about a treasure or ancient technology, it was about saving the future. The secrets his father had guarded were far bigger than anything he could have imagined. And now, it was Henry's turn to protect them. He looked at the woman, his mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. "What do I do now?" "We need to move quickly," she replied, her voice firm. "The enemy is closing in. If we don't act now, everything your father fought for will be lost." Henry nodded, his resolve hardening. This was his mission now. There was no turning back. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye. Henry stood silently, staring at the documents inside the hidden room, his father's legacy. Now in his hands, each piece of paper, each map, and each symbol felt like a weight he could hardly bear. The battles his father fought, the sacrifices he made, and the secrets he kept hidden for so long were now his responsibility. But what pained Henry the most wasn't just the mission ahead. It was the betrayal his father had suffered. Among all the sacrifices his father had made, there was one thing he had never shared: his comrades. The people he trusted the most had turned against him. They didn't just want the treasure his father was protecting, they wanted to erase everything his father had built. A conspiracy had been set in motion to seize the power his father had guarded. And Henry now had to face that same enemy. Looking through the maps and documents, Henry understood the gravity of the situation. His father had given up so much to protect these secrets. And now it was all at risk. The organization, which had once been a symbol of loyalty, had been corrupted. But Henry knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let everything his father worked for be destroyed. The woman who had led him here turned to face him, her expression filled with determination. Yet a hint of concern lingered in her eyes. "Henry, you can't do this alone," she said. "The enemy knows about the documents. They've infiltrated the organization. And now, they'll stop at nothing to get their hands on everything." Henry took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions rising within him. He understood now that the world he once knew had completely changed. He wasn't just the son of a soldier. He was the last line of defense for his father's legacy. And the future depended on him. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect what my father fought for," Henry said, his voice steady. The woman nodded. "We need to move fast. If we don't get these documents to a safe place, they will fall into the wrong hands. And everything will be lost. The traitors will not stop until they have it all." Henry felt the weight of her words. The mission ahead was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. But it was clear that there was no turning back. He had to protect his father's secrets. Not just for the family, but for the future of everyone who depended on those secrets staying hidden. Together, they left the hidden room and began their journey to safeguard the documents. Every step was filled with uncertainty. But Henry knew this was his path now. He had inherited his father's promise, and he would not let it be broken. The small wooden house, hidden deep in the forest, stood alone in eerie silence. Far from the world outside, Henry sat inside, his hands tightly gripping the documents his father had left behind. He stared out the window, watching the dim light of the setting sun filter through the thick canopy of trees, casting strange shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. The world around him was quiet, but within his heart, the tension was palpable. The confrontation ahead was inevitable. The enemy had begun their plans. And Henry had no choice but to prepare to protect everything his father had sacrificed. Never in his life had Henry felt the weight of responsibility as he did now. He was no longer just the son of a soldier. He was the last protector of a legacy that could change everything. He wasn't just fighting to preserve his father's memory, he was fighting for the future. For the truth that had been hidden for so long. Henry stood up, his fingers brushing over the old watch his father had worn. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a memory. The only thing he had left of his father. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the fleeting moments he spent with him as a child. The stories about war, the sacrifices his father made that Henry hadn't understood at the time. Now, as an adult, he finally understood the gravity of it all. The light outside began to fade, signaling the arrival of night. There was no more time to waste. Henry needed to act, and he needed to do it quickly before the enemy found them. But even as he prepared, he knew one thing: his life would never be the same again. A sudden knock at the door startled him. He stood up, walking slowly toward it, his heart racing. When he opened the door, he saw the woman who had led him through the forest before. Her face was no longer filled with worry, but determination. "We don't have much time," she said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. "The enemy is getting closer. We have to move now." Henry nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything his father had fought for, everything he had worked so hard to protect, was now in his hands. He couldn't afford to fail. "Let's go," he said, his voice firm. "We'll protect this, no matter what it takes." Together, they left the house, walking into the dense forest, where shadows seemed to grow deeper with each step. The air felt heavy, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Henry knew that this journey, this fight, would be the ultimate test, not just of his strength, but of his will to uphold his father's legacy. As they moved through the darkened woods, Henry couldn't shake the question that lingered in his mind: what was he really protecting? Was it just the documents and the secrets they held? Or was it something far more important, a truth that could change the course of history? And then, he realized, this was more than just about protecting his father's legacy. It was about ensuring that the sacrifices made by his father, and by so many others, weren't in vain. It was about preserving a future where the truth wasn't controlled by those who sought to exploit it for power, but one where it could be used to build a better world for future generations. With that realization, Henry's resolve strengthened. This fight wasn't just for him, or for his father, it was for everyone who depended on the truth being kept safe. The battle ahead would be long and difficult, but Henry knew that as long as he kept his promise to his father, he would never stop fighting. As they continued their journey through the forest, Henry took one last look at the world he once knew, knowing that when this was over, nothing would ever be the same again. The sound of gunfire echoed through the stillness of the forest, each shot marking the beginning of a battle that Henry knew would define everything. Every bullet fired, every step taken, brought him closer to the inevitable confrontation. His heart pounded in his chest as he moved swiftly through the woods, the weight of his father's legacy heavy on his shoulders. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future. For the truth that had been buried for so long. "Move," the woman shouted, her voice urgent as she led Henry deeper into the forest. "We don't have much time. The enemy is closing in." Henry didn't hesitate. He followed her, determination etched in his features. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Everything had led up to this. He had made a promise to his father, and now, he would keep it. As they reached a small clearing, Henry could feel the tension in the air. The enemy was near, and they were closing in fast. He could hear the crunch of footsteps in the underbrush, the whispers of those who sought to destroy everything his father had protected. The weight of the documents in his hands felt heavier with every passing second. "They're coming," the woman warned, as shadows began to move around them. Henry's grip tightened around the documents, and his eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of the enemy. He knew they were outnumbered, but he also knew that his father had spent his life protecting these secrets for a reason. Whatever it took, Henry was prepared to fight to keep them safe. Just as the first shadow appeared from behind the trees, Henry took a deep breath and turned to face the woman. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady. "I won't let them take it." The woman nodded, her eyes filled with respect and understanding. She knew that Henry had become the protector of this legacy, and now, he was ready to fight for it. The first man stepped out into the clearing, his weapon raised. Henry didn't flinch. He had faced death before, but this time, it was different. This wasn't just a battle, it was the final test of everything he had fought for, everything his father had died for. A moment of silence passed between them, and then, as the enemy closed in, Henry moved with the speed and precision of a trained soldier. The fight was brutal, but he fought with a fierce determination. knowing that every move he made was protecting not just the documents, but the future of everyone who depended on the truth being kept safe. The battle raged on, but Henry refused to back down. He fought with everything he had, knowing that the stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced before. And then, as the last of the enemy forces were defeated, Henry stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, his body aching from the fight. The documents were safe, the legacy was intact, but as he looked around, he realized that the battle wasn't just about protecting the past, it was about shaping the future. It was about ensuring that the secrets his father had kept hidden would never be used for evil, but instead, for good. "Is it over?" the woman asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. Henry nodded, his heart still racing from the intensity of the battle. "For now, yes, but we have to make sure it stays that way." They turned to leave the clearing, knowing that the fight was far from over. The truth was safe, but the world was still full of danger. There were others who would stop at nothing to gain control of what Henry had just fought to protect. As they walked away, Henry's mind raced. This battle had been won, but there were still more questions, more mysteries to uncover. The world his father had protected was far bigger than he had ever imagined. And Henry now understood that his journey was just beginning. He glanced at the woman beside him, knowing that together, they would continue to protect the truth. But deep down, he also knew that the most important battle of all was the one within himself, the battle to honor his father's legacy and the promise he had made to protect the future. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the forest. It felt like the end of one chapter. But Henry knew that his story was far from finished. There were still many challenges ahead, many battles to fight, but no matter what happened, he was ready to face them. After all, he had a promise to keep.